Hello, I'm Fernando Hellmann from the Federal University of Santa Catarina in Brazil. I'll be discussing post-trial access in Latin America, focusing on perception and insights from members of Research Ethics Committee across the region. Post-trial access, hereafter referred to as PTA, is an internationally recognized ethical right, but faces significant practical challenge. The objective was to analyze the perception of Research Ethics Committee members regarding post-trial access. This study is based on 35 in-depth interviews and two focus groups conducted with Research Ethics Committee members from 6 Latin American countries. Participants include from Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, Costa Rica. A thematic analysis was employed to identify key challenges, practice, and propose solutions related to post-trial access. The results are organized into 5 key categories, 2 of which include detailed subcategories, which I will now briefly describe. PTA regulation in Latin America varies widely, from robust framework to no specific regulation at all. Brazil, Costa Rica, and Argentina have a stronger legal framework, but practical monitoring is still lacking. In Peru, the right to PTA is recognized, but responsibilities remain undefined. Meanwhile, Mexico and Colombia rely on voluntary initiative and informal agreement due to weak regulatory system. Research Ethics Committee generally require formal commitments to ensure PTA, but their practices vary widely across countries. Some committees adopt a rigorous approach, explicitly guaranteeing PTA in protocols and informed consent documents. Others are less interventionist, often due to weak legislation or logistical challenges, relying on informal arrangement that put participants' rights at risk. About eligibility criteria for PTA, the primary criteria is clinical benefit. However, ambiguity exists in legislation and committees' practice about who determines this benefit, whether it is the treating physician, research investigation, or based on scientific literature. This lack of clarity leads to inconsistencies in eligibility and decision making. A specific consideration also emerged. For vaccine trial, access for placebo participant is explicitly defined. Conditions like HIV, cancer, and the ultra-rare disease are generally better regulated. Despite this, ethics committees encounter significant challenges. Define PTA for non-inferiority trials, for example, and addressing trials involve me-too drugs, which offer minimal clinical benefit, and seeding trials, where commercial interests often take precedence over clinical value. Now let's explore who should provide PTA, for how long it should be offered. Fixed duration and sponsor responsibility appears in Costa Rica, where sponsors must ensure perpetual access. In Brazil, access is guaranteed as long as needed, except for ultra-rare disease, where it's capped at 5 years. In Argentina, extension protocols provide access only until drugs approval or commercialization. Responsibility of the state. In Mexico and Colombia, weak regulation shifts the burden to the state, often relying on judicial action. Similarly, in Brazil, judicialization frequently steps in when sponsors fail. Challenges arise because unclear regulation in Mexico and Colombia create uncertainty, while the local unavailability of trial drugs remain a significant hurdle. Now let's focus on how PTA should be implemented and mechanisms commonly used across Latin America. The first mechanism is compassionate use, which provides access to medication before commercial approval for participants with severe conditions or no alternative. Next are essential protocols, and lastly, there is a directly distribution by sponsor, formally required in Brazil and Costa Rica. Despite these mandates, practical challenges and lack of oversight often undermine its effectiveness. Here are the main obstacles to effectively implementing post-trial access. bureaucratic and contractual issues, coordinating challenges among sponsors, regulators, and research organizations create delays and bottlenecks complicating PTA implementation, administrative and logistical barriers. Problems such as improper drug disposal, inadequate infrastructure for extension studies, and limited regulatory support hinder the practical application of PTAs. Barriers in phase 2 trials. Early phase studies often lack sufficient safety and efficacy data, making PTA implementation for participants in these trials more complex. Tested drugs are often not registered, commercialized, or included in public health coverage in Latin America, limiting access for participants and local communities. Deficiency in monitoring and oversight, such as the absence of regular audits, enforcement mechanisms, and clear tracking system for PTA commitments, further disrupt post-trial treatment continuity. These gaps result in unfulfilled commitments and leave participants without the support they need. Regarding the impact of PTA on public health system, interviewees highlighted significant challenges, including economic strains and reliance on judicial mechanisms. The high cost of trial-tested drugs burdens public budgets, particularly in countries with constitutional health rights. Litigation to enforce PTA commitments further deplete research, while the lack of post-trial pricing strategies and high drugs prices limit access, undermining equitable health care. Interviewees propose several solutions to address PTA challenges in Latin America. A primary recommendation is ensuring continuous treatment access for participants with critical conditions. Strengthening regional cooperation and regulation is essential, with enforceable protocols and ongoing monitoring to enhance compliance and accountability. To improve affordability, sponsors should disclose drug pricing before trial starts, and preferential agreements should be established for trials conducted locally. Furthermore, trials for drugs not intended for local commercialization should be prohibited. This measure aims to establish a more equitable and effective PTA framework in the region. In conclusion, regulation and national policy for PTA in Latin America differ wildly, and even the most robust legal framework often fail to guarantee access. Interview response revealed that research ethics committees lack the authority to enforce PTA commitments from pharmaceutical companies, even in cases where trials produce positive results and the drugs gains approval from internationally recognized regulatory agencies. To address this gap, comprehensive studies are needed to quantify how often participants received access to experimental products that benefit them during trials. Merely acknowledging participants' rights and the obligation from pharmaceutical companies is not enough. Institutionalizing these obligations requires a coordinated international effort to establish clear implementation guidelines and standardized practice, particularly to prevent exploitation in law in middle-income countries such as Latin America. The references and reports for research conducted by the NGO Salud y Fármacos across various Latin American countries are available on its website. Thank you very much for your attention.